So next on our program lineup is a very special presentation. The presenter is no stranger to Ontario toy collectors, and we've had him giving some sessions on our monthly toy collector chats. Always does a great presentation, an expert in the field of toy collecting in North America, author in Toy Farmer magazine, and a longtime friend of us in Canada, being actually a Canadian native who was transplanted to the US. And at this time, we're going to have a presentation on Canadian toys, namely the Cockshutt and the Co-op lineups. And so we're so pleased that Doug Harke has agreed to be here and to share his presentation skills once again, as well as his depth of knowledge. So Doug, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I'll share my screen and we'll get going on this. Many of you know the history of Cockshutt much better than I do. Cockshutt, headquartered in Brantford, Ontario, made a long line of implements, and their early tractors were made by Oliver and Hart Parr. And then after World War II ended, they began developing their own tractor. And their first of their tractors that they manufactured themselves you recognize this design. This was a very unique Cockshutt design. One of the features of this tractor was a live power takeoff. And at their 1947 introduction, Cockshutt was the first farm tractor with live power takeoff. The most popular model of Cockshutt tractors was the 30, which was a 2-3 plow tractor. And probably the first Cockshutt toy was made in the United States by Advanced Products, a company out of Cleveland, Ohio. And this toy, this is an original toy. It's a little dinged up, but of course, remember that toy is 75 years old. And this is a model of the Cockshutt 30. These were slush mold, which meant that the molten metal was poured into a metal mold, and then before all of the metal hardened, the rest was poured out, and you were left with a shell on the outside and a very granular inside. This was a very basic tractor. It was hollow inside, and you notice a solid rubber wheels, and it doesn't steer. This is a rear view of it. And one of the other features, this is a soft plastic or hard rubber steering wheel. It was pushed on there. And if you're going to buy an original one of these, the critical pieces to look for, make sure the seat isn't broken. That's a cast-in seat. And that PTO is often broken off. And that's another feature. And then this little hitch tab is also broken off. And this is the box that they came in. This isn't a very good box, but those boxes are getting pretty old now. About just a little bit later, you could buy a co-op version of the Cockshutt tractor. And I won't talk much about the history of co-op. Again, I think many of our viewers know more about the history of co-op than I do. And you can see this is an identical to the Advanced Product Cockshutt 30. This one's been restored and shares the same features. This is again a rear view of it with showing the PTO and the seat and the hitch tab. Now, sometime after these two, I think after these two tractors, this ad appeared. I don't know the year of this. I was given this long time ago by the late Bill Duncan, who was a long-time Cockshutt collector in Ohio. And you can see this one was also made by Advanced Products. And I'll show you the actual toy before I comment. This has different rear wheels. Again, it has solid rear wheels, but they're larger than the other tractor. Notice that it has a tin seat. And this was the same seat that was used on the Ferguson 20, which came out, I think, in about 1949. So that would be, I guess, the vintage of this. And the Ferguson was a 1/12 scale, so you see that seat's a little oversized. It's got a hard plastic steering wheel, and the front wheels weren't painted, but you notice that the front wheels were fastened with a rod that was squeezed on the ends. And the other thing is that this tractor doesn't steer like the other early ones, but that pedestal swivels, so it actually, you can make a turn by pushing on it. The other unique thing was it had a muffler and it had an air intake. And then you notice a bit of the gear shift lever here. These are very rare, where the Cockshot 30 is turns up quite regularly. This version of the Co-op is very rare. And as far as I can tell, they did not make a Cockshot version of this. This is the side view of the same. The other tractor I showed you was an original one that I bought in pieces years ago. I assembled it and sold it. Probably would sell for a lot more than when I sold it years ago. Notice this gear shift. This gear shift was actually a nail, a fancy nail that was bent over and put in there. Quite a realistic model. And this is the box that it came in. This ad appeared in the Cockshut Buyer's Guide in 1950. A buyer's guide, remember, shows you all the tractors and the implements that Cockshut made. And this is the line of toys made by Lincoln. So this appeared in the 1950 Buyer's Guide. And notice a couple of things. The tractor and implements they were not packaged together. Tractor cost $1.80. The implements were $3.20. This is a restored Cockshot 30 by Lincoln. And you notice it's got the same style of fenders, steering wheel, seat as the 44 Massey's, also made by Lincoln, and the same wheels. One of the variations of this has sort of a tread pattern or knobby front wheel. So those were the two major variations of these early Lincoln Cockshuts. This is a better view. You can see they had a finishing nail for a gear shift. And this shows, this one I restored. I had a couple of these and I restored them and sold them. And I was able to do that because Hilke Dan carried quite an extensive line of parts to restore Lincoln toys, and probably that steering wheel and that seat may have been some of Hilke's parts. There were other variations of this Lincoln Cockshut, and this one shows an air intake and a muffler. And this is another variation of this. This is a later one. By the mid-1950s, Lincoln had gone to wooden rear rims for its wheels, and this one has the wooden rear rims. And this is another version of what the stacks look like. There seemed to be a lot of variations in quality control on the Lincolns, and that's just one of the results. This is the Cockshut wagon I showed you earlier in that ad, a Cockshut 95 wagon, and it was the same design as the Massey wagon. And this is the Cockshutt Farm Set, the implement set with the mower and the single disc and the drag tooth harrow. And again, these were very similar to the implements that are available for the Masseys. In 1953, this ad appeared in the Cockshut Buyer's Guide, again, which advertises the real stuff. And this, you'll recognize, this is the set here, the Canadian set. This company also made the international sets and so forth. And they were plastic. And this is a nice original plastic Cockshot 30 made by Kemp. And when you're buying one, you want to make sure that the air intake and the muffler are on. Notice the headlights here, they're on. The pulley is on. That's a pretty good original one. And this is a rear view of that tractor. This one, for some reason, the headlights are missing on it and the muffler is missing, but it gives you a good view of the rear of the tractor. And notice the nice detail, the seat and the hitch. the only parts available to work on these. Some of us have cast some parts. For one of the collectors down here that has an extensive selection of these Kemp Cockshuts, I cast some mufflers and air intakes and some lights. And this is the box that the Kemp Cockshut came in. And they made a very limited number of narrow front Cockshut 30s, Kemp did. And people attribute these to, call them salesman samples, that the salesman could take around to the dealerships to show what the narrow front version. And they did not make a separate box for the narrow front. They came in the wide front boxes. And here's that wagon. The Kemp wagons are often warped. And this one is a nice wagon except for the warpage. And some of them had a Cockshut decal right on the side here. The next Cockshut toy appeared around the mid-50s. And this is another tractor made by Advanced Product, but this is a die-cast tractor. It's steerable. That wheel turns, that steering wheel turns the front wheel. And notice it's got headlights. It's got a belt pulley. This is the rear view of it. It's got a real fragile hitch drawbar system, and often these are missing from these tractors. But these were nice detailed die cast. And one thing I should have showed you, it's got a 6-cylinder engine as opposed to those earlier toys that had 4-cylinder engines. So this was probably, it could be a 40 or a 50. It didn't say which one it was. And this is the box for that Cockshut 40 or 50 by Advanced Products. This is fairly scarce, and to find one that's unbroken is very difficult. They also made a wagon, and this one, it's a little smaller scale than the tractor, closer to 1/20th scale, and you could get 2 different sizes of wheels on that wagon. And if you want one that looks closer to 1/16th, you get the version that has the bigger wheels. This is the box that the wagon came in. This is a pretty nice box for being 70 years old, or almost 70 years old. One of the last Cockshut toys that Advanced Products made was this 540 utility. And this tractor also steers. It's got swing axle steering. And if you look at the rear, it has a 3-point hitch. They never made any implements for it. It was painted an odd color. It wasn't a true Cockshut color. The only way to get a color to restore your toy is to see an original and custom mix your paint. Early on in production, they made a red belly version, and these are very difficult to find. This is a restored one, similar to the all cream version, but it's got the red belly. And this is the box that the 540 came in. And Dakota Toys and some of the other parts manufacturers carries a pretty decent selection of parts to restore your 540 utility. Sometime in the 50s, when they were making Japanese tin toys, this Co-op Combine appeared, and this is a fairly small toy. It's about 4 inches long, and I've sold a couple of them. Don't know much about them other than that. Well, the later on, after White bought out Cockshut, they stopped production of the Cockshut tractors and used Oliver tractors, and so Ertl got into the business. And this is about a 1967 or about 1966 Cockshut 1850, and it's got the vermilion red and cream color. And some of these had die-cast front wheels. This particular one happens to have a plastic front wheel rim. This is a restored one, so I don't have another original picture. This is the package for that Cockshut 1850. It came in a bubble box, and if you were able to find one of these today with the original bubble wrap, that would bring a pretty small fortune on the auction market. And this is from the late 70s Cockshut or Ertl General Toy Catalog. They made a red 1850, And so that had white plastic wheel rims all the way around. And this is one in a box. This shows it in a bubble box, but they also came in the open front box like the later 1855 series Olivers. So I've seen one of those in that other box, but unfortunately couldn't find a picture. They made a farm set. As far as I know, the implements weren't sold separately, and this is a Cockshut disc. In fact, this one's going to be sold in the Geneseo auction, in the Geneseo Toy Show and auction coming up in the beginning of December of this year. This is the rear of that disc showing the Cockshut decal. It's a pretty good original one. And this is a spreader, which also came in the farm set. It's got a plastic red beater. It's red with white rims on it. And you're going to ask why I'm showing you this Oliver farm set. It's because I can't find a picture of the Cockshut farm set. The Cockshut farm set, 1850 farm set, was identical to this, except it said Cockshut on here, and this is the set where that Cockshut spreader and Cockshut disc came from. The last one of these I saw was in the early 2000s. There was one on eBay, and a speculator bought it for $3,250 at that time, around 2000, 2001, somewhere around there. And he resold it. And I don't know, I've never seen one since. That's probably the rarest of the farm toys. And then Ertl got into the business again. They produced some sets of Cockshuts to raise money to build the Farm Toy Museum in Dyersville, Iowa. And this is set number 1. And this is, you've got, the casting they chose was the larger, the 6-cylinder model. So this is a 50s and 40s. So they could use the same casting for either one of those toys. And they were sold in a set of 3. I think the set was around $100, $110 that it cost at that time. And the other major casting they made of this was the 20 series, the small Cockshut 20s and Co-op 20s. They were a 2-plow tractor. And I've forgotten which set this is, what number. They made a total of, I think, 5 or 6 sets. And some of the later ones, they made the square nose Cockshuts. Again, they made the big tractor version, the ones with the 6-cylinder tractors. This was the 560 wide front. And you can see that it doesn't have automotive steering. It steers, but the whole front axle swivels. I was going to mention that when you buy a set of these, you want to buy the outer box. See this brown outer box here? That if you're paying the set price, you got to make sure you get the outer box. And this is another version. This was a model of the later one. This is the 570 narrow front, again in one of the sets. And then a one of, for the Cockshut show, I think it was in the sometime in the early 90s, they made the 580 Super. And if you remember that when White bought out Cockshut, they were in the middle of making the real 580s, and there were apparently 3 of these 580s made, and White ordered that they all be destroyed, and somehow one survived, and the real one is in the hands of 3 collectors shared in Ohio, and apparently it shows up at some of the Cockshut shows from time to time. And that one, I think, was a fairly large tractor, was a 100 horsepower tractor made to compete with the John Deere 4010 and eventually the International 806. That is my Cockshut presentation. Doug, you're back on.
Well, that's great, Doug, and thank you so much. A lot of great information there. We do have a little bit of time for some questions or comments, so if anyone wants to come on and ask a question or share some Cockshut knowledge, now is a great time to do so. Any comments or questions at this point?
I'm still looking for the person who has that Cockshutt 1850 farm set in the box. Maybe one of these days, Doug, you'll bring yours out of hiding.
Oh, yeah, really, as if I could afford one of those. My goodness. As you've already indicated, they're a fairly rare commodity, and it would be interesting to see one in person. The early Ontario Toy Show series was also Cockshutt, starting with the Golden Arrow and versions of the 1850 and 1855. And the Cockshutt 70 was quite a rare tractor too, I think, especially that it was painted green and not red.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Doug. I didn't cover any of the Cockshot toys made by Scale Models. I'm not as knowledgeable on those. You're much more knowledgeable than I am.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, and so what happened was it was our intent for the Ontario Toy Show that we were going to run a series of Cockshutt tractors, and mainly because they were Canadian product. Brantford is only a half-hour drive from where the show is hosted. So that was our strategy or our plan. And then when Earl came out with the National Toy Museum kit sets, the Cockshutt sets, that kind of ruined our plan of what we were going to do in the future. And then that's when we switched to the international line. And the very first one, I think it was in 1981, was the narrow front IH806 tractor, which at the time set the industry by storm because it was the very first time that Scale Models had used real rubber tires for the tractors. And so that one was in very high demand because when people saw it, they were impressed by what quality Scale Models had put into that tractor. But by the time many saw it, it was too late to order. So that's kind of how we got started in Cockshutt and then transferred into IH.